Welcome to the Pastor and Postmaster podcast. What you wanted to hear in the sermon, but you didn't.
Where the academy meets every day.
And the postmaster's back. He told us about...
Don't forget about the princess.
I'm sometimes late.
And the princess who's here, always here, and can't go on without her because, well, that's basically the lion's work of the podcast, is the production part. So thank you so much. We are back, though, with Seth because, you know what? It was so good. We just had to have more.
And we're wearing the same clothes.
Well, yeah, why not? I mean, why not? And you know what? Actually, why not, Bo? I mean, we know our church history. We know that real society has not been tried where we don't have cops. And I know we have a former police officer here, but imagine, as John Lennon said, just imagine, there aren't no police. Imagine there is no force. Imagine that someone just shows up and just says, guys, let's all just love each other. We haven't yet made that world possible.
Can't we all just get along?
Why can't we all get along? We can't get along because the system enforces violence. Seth, that's kind of the narrative that people who haven't lived too much life can sometimes say. Mm-hmm. I mean, is it possible? What happens? Let's just imagine one day the 100,000 people doesn't have any police.
Yeah.
Do we all do the best we can to our neighbor?
Yeah.
You would like to think that, and maybe that's a fairy tale perspective, I think, in a sense, right? But there has to be a consequence for action, right? So when you have laws that have to be enforced, or whether it be law enforcement, or you could use in a military setting for like a different scenario, if you're not going to hold somebody accountable for action, the human nature is going to continue to victimize, and the victimization is going to get more and more severe because people can continue to get away with more and more and more, right? And so there's this line drawn in the proverbial sand that law enforcement stands on to protect the community, protect people's rights.
Protect the weaker against the stronger.
Yes, right? Because some people just by nature are just the way they're made. And this goes back to the fallen self, right? The inherent sin nature in all of us. Some people are just predators per se. They're going to seek out the prey and hurt the prey all the time. And that's just the way things are. But there has to be a consequence for action, right? And what is that consequence? Well, I mean, we're going to go down a big time rabbit hole if we want to go down this way, but now we're into man's law and God's law on this thing, right? So the line is drawn in the sand. We're there towing the line for the citizens. Violence and we'll just say violence and crime and the worst that is out there happens. People flee from that. We run towards it. We're duty bound. And I will say this, kind of looking back at it, it really takes a special person to want to get into this. People think they want to be a cop. They'll go through 6 to 10 months of training. They'll do all the book smart stuff. And then the moment you go to an agency and you start to work, everything you learned in the classroom that we tried to make a scenario for you as realistic as possible goes right out the window. Because guess what? People are not going to cooperate with you at certain times, and you've got to make decisions, right? And people find out very early on whether they're meant for this profession or not. And the bottom line is that a law enforcement officer, in dealing with the community every day, has to engage. They have to do something to engage. And the worst thing you could have for someone who thinks they want to get into law enforcement is, number one, they're not safe because they're going to get themselves hurt and they're going to get other people hurt. And they fail to engage. They fail to make a decision. We are afforded by the Constitution, this profession, law enforcement, the ability to make decisions on other people's behalf. We have the ability to stop somebody's freedom of movement. There is a great responsibility in that, but you've got to make a decision. So a lot of officers will wash out because of the fact they're not safe or they won't make this decision. But going back to what you said, looking about it from that eternal or the biblical perspective, right? So that inherent sin nature in all of us, people are going to continue to victimize others. Might there be moments where they do things that are kind of sort of good, but ultimately the nature of that person has fallen to begin with. That's why there's a desperate need for a savior in everybody's life.
Amen.
If people can't recognize that, I mean, sin is sin in God's eyes. Whether you steal $1 or $1,000, in a cop's eyes, it's a misdemeanor and a felony. The difference between the two, right? But sin is sin, right? And so people will continue to victimize other folks unless there is a threat of consequence for action, and that's where a law enforcement professional would come into play to hold somebody accountable for that poor behavior, that misbehavior.
So really, what you're saying is this: is it Lenin who's saying that? What was that? Who was the?
Lenin theorized about it. I know, but specifically Friedrich Engels, which
Okay.
Engels and Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto.
So basically, that isn't. It's never going to be a paradise, no matter how much you cut back on law enforcement or beat up on them or reduce the size of the amount of police force. I just think it's such a fantasy a lot of people have.
Well, the experiment has failed over and over, but you can see where in the 19th century when people have this optimistic golden age kind of view, they think they can try it again, and it fails. And then come forward to the 21st century, we think we can set up an autonomous zone downtown Seattle. Chaz. People get murdered. They're getting victimized.
They're
by
calling the
predators.
police. They're literally calling the police.
But the predators are out there. Because predators will go where there's people to take advantage of. And so there's nothing worse when you think about it than a group of people who don't think they need police, who assemble together somewhere.
Yeah, and the Scripture obviously teaches us that that we are depraved. The heart is deceitfully wicked above all things, and even we alluded to this in the first episode about the just war theory, the idea that from Romans 13 and 1 Peter 2 that force is necessary from a legitimate authority, government, to protect the weak potential victim against the strong, and the idea that you abolish police, this humanistic perspective, is that there aren't those people, and that the only thing to blame is the system. That the police force create the problem. That's false, of course.
Right, and as if the system creates these kind of people, these predatory people, and suddenly they're going to stop being. You're going to have all these people who have been raised in the system who are adults and they're predatory, and they're just going to somehow go along with this. Like it's going to get grandfathered in somehow.
Right.
Yeah, it's the idea that it's a Gnostic idea, basically, that what makes you a sinner is you don't have enough knowledge. If you just had the right information, you'll do the right thing.
Yep.
And you don't need someone to have the legal potential for force. It's fallacious, but it never goes. It's the rebellion we have against God and His law. Like we hate the idea that we're called sinners.
Well, the person has to want to accept that to make the change. We go back to the person who's a slave to their addiction and the drugs. When they know that they have every opportunity, free opportunity, that the state will provide them to be able to recuperate from this, but they're happy in the gutter or in the bushes because they don't have any accountability at this point, right?
They're autonomous in some way.
Yeah, and so you think about that like, okay, you can give me all the knowledge in the world, but there's an expression, book smarts and street smarts are two different things, right? So you can provide me with all that knowledge, but I have to be willing to take that knowledge and put it to good use. And that's, drugs are bad for me. It's killing me. My family is devastated over my addiction. I victimize people because of my addiction. There's a way for me to get out to help myself, and there's literally a hand extended, but am I willing to take it or not? And that's where the conscious mind makes that decision.
Incredible how the school systems and the college systems have really dealt a major blow to the minds of, I would say, the millennials.
And younger.
Possibly younger,
Yeah.
even a little, probably even some boomers. But we've been poisoned by the educational system that was supposed to be there to sort of promote country and to promote
civic
behavior.
virtue.
Yes, and we've just been told that it's just this complete turnaround.
Because all you need is this.
Yeah. Yep. There you
All
go,
right.
Ryan.
Yep. Got it. That's all I need to know. Thank you very much.
Well, to Sean's, what Sean was saying, and maybe you can speak to this, in the little bit of experience and time I worked with homelessness down in the Tenderloin in San Francisco and in Grass Valley, Nevada City, my conclusion was, after talking to the people, like engaging them, yes, a large percentage of them were addicted to drugs and so forth, or having some sort of mental issues. But a number of guys, especially that I met, they realized that they could live rough, they could panhandle, make about $80 a day, and they could have a pretty decent living. I mean, it wasn't the kind of living I wanted, but to them there was no pressure to come off the street. And I would say that to people, and they would go, "Oh, come on, Bo, come on, you're just a conservative." And then finally, in the last few years,
you're just a conservative.
I started hearing professionals say that you just have this large population. And so in Nevada City, there's always fires starting and things happening up there because these guys are allowed to live rough in the woods in the Brunswick area.
Fire season,
Which is,
fire season,
insane. But there's no pressure to change. There's no
There's no
they don't feel
incentive
any,
even.
there's no incentive.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And yet you're not, as a law enforcement officer, and this is also the other side of the coin, you have the legal constitutional right to use force, potentially loss of life to a person who's a perpetrator. Most of the time, you said, it doesn't happen. Only 1% of the time is there, really
less than
physical
1%,
engagement. Less than
yeah.
well, that's small. But that's not what I see on social media, so I'll just go with that. Anyway, choose your own adventure. But one thing I would say, though, you talked about the standards and about duty, because this is the Christian part of policing. It's not that you're an execution squad that's marauding with weapons, because if that were the case, you would never risk your life in any situation. You would just shoot first, ask questions later. So there is a part of serving. It's out of love that you go a lot of risks to try to diffuse the situation. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, in that, this is where as a man of faith, where my profession, I treated it as a ministry, right? And I wanted to be able to try to affect that positive change through Christ Jesus, because I realized that some people may never be, or very rarely ever, exposed to the saving grace of our Lord, right? So in kind of seeing all that, yes, you're putting yourself in harm's way for a stranger. There's something
Counterintuitive about that.
I was just going to say there's something ludicrous, but also noble about it in the same breath, right? Yeah, and so
You've risked a lot.
yeah, it's a lot to think about and to do in a certain setting to be able to provide that sense of security. But I realize that I may be that only rescuer that person potentially may have that day, or the action that I'm going to do may be the first step for a road to recovery for somebody, or the first step in preventing that person from being victimized again. So there's a lot of weight in how you handle those certain calls for service and in the job as a whole. It really comes down to, like we talked about, that police community partnership to start, and how important that is for the jurisdiction I last worked for. Like I said, I had that great relationship with the community, but you could go 15 miles south and the relationship was like cats and dogs. The cops didn't care for the members of the community. The community didn't compare for the members of law enforcement. This job's tough enough as it is. I couldn't imagine having the citizens in your business all the time. And I will say this, truly by the grace of God, was I not exposed to a lot citizens showing their hatred for you just because you chose to do this for a profession.
You wear a uniform.
Praise
Yeah.
the Lord.
Yeah. I mean, and I have a dear friend of mine, probably one of my closest brothers in the faith, who works for Portland Police Department.
Oh.
And if I'm not mistaken, and I may be off a little bit, but I believe he went to, no joke, riots for like 100 straight days.
Wow.
Think of the psyche on a person,
Oh, poor guy.
right? And I wouldn't wish that upon my worst enemy. I really wouldn't.
100
Right?
straight days.
Was that when like the federal buildings were under siege? And
So this is going back to like
2017.
Yes, this is going back to like 2020 with George
okay.
Floyd and all those
Okay.
issues associated with that. And I'm probably off on the number, but all I know is God bless him, right?
So, so then how did you end up getting into, because I don't imagine it's It's like when I grow up. I mean, it might be when I grow up, I want to be a cop. But
I thought about
sounds
that.
like you did. Well, so what drew you to that profession?
I don't think it ever any time when I was a kid I ever thought I wanted to be a cop. I love baseball and played baseball into college and then played men's league afterward and a few things. So my entire youth and adolescence was wanting to be a baseball player, and fortunately I was good enough to have some looks from some colleges, and received a scholarship to play baseball at Sacramento State. I took a class, my first semester, Intro to Criminal Justice, and it was taught by a sociologist. And I was fascinated as she taught and spoke about the police-community partnership and the interaction and how law enforcement helps the community. Rewinding a little bit, and maybe not realizing this as an 18-year-old college freshman, looking at it now as, a middle-aged guy, I grew up in a home of violence, domestic violence, substance abuse, mental illness. And as I'm taking this class, I realized how I could help. It sounds cliche, but I realized how I could help people in need. Nobody was ever there for me in need as a kid to help me. And I thought to myself, wow, I could potentially be that rescuer that I wanted as a child, someone to free me from this violence. So I get my degree in criminal justice, and a little more than a year later, about 18 months or so, I started my law enforcement career in late 2000. Going back with this, I wasn't saved till I was 25. So the first few years of my career, I was not a believer. I was raised Catholic and knew of God, but did not know him, truly know him as my Lord and Savior. And thank goodness that from the beginning of time, my name was written in God's book of life, because I couldn't imagine my life in the law enforcement profession without Jesus Christ being there with me through it, thick and thin, through all the struggles and the tragedies and the wonderful things. And like I said, the things I wouldn't wish upon my worst enemy. And I wonder sometimes, a lot of cops aren't believers. I wonder how they cope and deal with this job and the stresses of it, and not have a feeling or a relationship, not a feeling, but a relationship with God. I wonder how they do it. It seems empty to me, how they try to manage this under their own understanding and their own power. I'm weak in the flesh, so I can only imagine what that is like for somebody in that situation, to have to deal with this and have nothing to fall back on except what you think your own understanding is.
Yeah.
Makes sense that the marriage divorce rate's high.
Yeah, that's what I would wonder. And so in your case, Seth, you have this doctrinal foundation, knowing that humans are fallen. So you know that as the explanation for what's going on, and you have a mission from God in Romans 13. Like you've got a job that's mandated in Scripture. That someone needs to fill that role.
It's good job security in both of those, isn't there?
Yeah. So you're going into this vocation or this field. You have a good foundation to work out of, whereas other people, the winds of change and the culture and so forth can dictate. And we've talked about some of those things where people think that there's a lot of this idea that people are basically good, and if we just educate them, they're not going to pound on one another and that kind of thing. But that's not true.
Yeah.
So.
And I think too, you kind of alluded to this as well. I mean, there are still, even within this state and country, there are very high standards for police officers.
Yeah.
As there should be.
Yeah. And why don't we lower them? I mean, why don't we? I mean, some of those standards, yeah.
That's a white pill for us, because I mean, seriously, like, as bad as I think things are, in the country or in my neighborhood, having traveled to Uganda or Suriname, we know what other police forces are like. And we know that those are more characteristic of other police forces around the world.
Yep.
Right. So we've got excellent law
Yeah.
enforcement here in this country.
And I'm going to be a little biased here. There's no doubt in my mind the California cop is the best trained cop in the country. No
Okay.
doubt.
You know what?
That's
I
interesting.
do not disagree.
The standards that
interesting.
the professional standards and training in California are truly the best in the country. And I have law enforcement friends throughout the country that will always say, "You cops are trained really well. Like you're trained very professionally."
Nice.
And so I feel very fortunate to be on that side of things. And you talk about like the standards, right? And so you can't expect perfection from me, but you can, as a citizen, demand excellence from your local law enforcement professionals. We have to be excellent. We have to be. It is a matter of life and death sometimes to be excellent in what we do. Are we going to make mistakes along the way? Are we going to mess up? Absolutely. That's just kind of how things go. But I think about this when you talk about the standards. Your loved one is going in for an open heart surgery. You don't want the C- doctor that barely passed his medical exams, or he or she
Got in there through DEI.
Yeah, he or she fell out of favor with their license, right? You want the A+ surgeon to come in
quota.
from John Hopkins
Yes.
University, or it's a thunderstorm and I don't want the pilot that barely made it through flight school flying me over the thunderstorm over the Rockies. I want the excellent pilot. You should say the same thing about your law enforcement officers. So speaking about law enforcement today, it is a tough business. Not only is it a tough business because the job is so demanding, but it is a tough business right now, the profession, because it's not a popular profession that people want to get into. And it's going to wear on a guy. It's going to wear on a gal when people berate you and wish you dead
Right.
solely based off of what you do for a living to pay the bills, right? That's really, really sad.
You're
Like,
serving.
yeah. Like, I mean, I'm going to say this all in jest, but if I had my way, I'd be playing first base for the Red Sox or,
Right.
something like that. But
Shame on those Red Sox.
Yeah. But this is what the Lord it called me to do. So, with all that, you should demand excellence. And for law enforcement to lessen their standards from excellent to very good is going to be devastating for the community.
Yeah.
And fortunately, the vast majority of agencies, and I can speak for the agency that I recently retired from, would not lower their standard there. And the thing about the standard is it's the dumbing down of society. And what I mean by that is...
I'm offended.
Yeah, right, yeah. Where drug use would automatically be a disbarment or a disqualification. But now, as long as some drugs at a certain amount of time, it wouldn't be a potential problem. DUI or something of that nature may have been a disbarment. Now, if it was that long ago and you showed you
5 weeks ago.
yeah, whatever that may be. And I focus on the drug thing because obviously I'm oversensitive to that, working the vast majority of my career in narcotics. But there are some drugs, of course, that are still no-goes, absolutely no-goes, right? But like where 30 years ago, 25 years ago, when I was getting the profession, cannabis would have been a disqualifier. Now, if you haven't used it in the last year. It took me 6 months to go to the academy,
back
another
hurts.
3 months to get hired from you, which that just means that I stopped using cannabis less than 6 months ago, 3 months ago. Super weird, right?
When you began talking about it, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't want to say anything, but you brought it up. I mean, I grew up in Whittier, which is East LA, and so we had the Whittier Police Department and the Los Angeles County Sheriffs. That was my introduction to law enforcement, And I can remember that Whittier was like a real holdout. Like you could not apply for the job if you'd ever smoked pot. Like I think until the 90s or something, but that was well known. Like, and they were excellent. It was an excellent police department.
I'm sure it was.
It was.
Very, very, very. Everybody wants to know. I know you want to know. Have you, Seth, been on an episode of Cops?
Oh.
Right?
No.
No.
This could change.
How about this?
This could change things.
How about this? I've never been on an episode of Cops, but I have appeared in television shows as a subject matter expert in law enforcement.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Dang.
That's
I
great.
was hoping for a.
Yeah.
Speaking of the standards, we talk, and we've had a lot of background conversations on phone calls, hours of this.
Yeah.
So a lot of these stories I know, and more that we could share in the second episode. But you're on a call and you're in a drug bust. Why don't you just take a little bit of the cash for yourself? I mean, you earned it. These are bad guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Slippery slope for sure, right?
why not? You're
Yeah.
entitled to it. To the winner goes the spoils.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Well, there's a lot of factors to come into play here, right? Let's just say you're held to a higher standard. You swore an oath not to do that sort of, let's just call it what it is, criminal behavior, right? The criminal is going to be the criminal, and you expect the criminal to compromise their integrity to be the criminal, right? But you are held to a higher standard. And if you are to commit something like that, and the citizens are entrusting you to uphold the line and do what's right and lawful, you're no better than the criminal to them. Even worse, because they expect the criminal to do bad things. They don't expect it from you. And it's a huge slippery slope. And God really blessed me and protected me in my career, because unfortunately, just the nature of things, I had been around and worked with guys. I didn't know this, by the way, so please don't think that I knew this, right? I didn't know this at the time, but there were officers that I worked with that were dirty, right? And then through investigations, discovered these sort of things. I can speak of one instance. This was not involving me, but I was familiar with who the people were. They busted a drug dealer, and they found like $20 or $100 or something. And yeah, I've done all this work, chasing this guy all over town. Let's have a few beers on him tonight. So they took the money. Well, here's the deal. The drug dealer's paranoid that he's going to get robbed by some other drug dealer or somebody who wants dope who's going to come in his house and hold him up at gunpoint. He's got security cameras all over the inside of his house surreptitiously placed. Can you imagine going to court with the defense counsel saying, hey, here's your cop stealing money from this guy? Yeah, right? So they're no better. They're no better.
It's so funny because if you only and it goes back to the idea of like that policing is legitimate violence or potential like force because it's under authority and the law. But if you were just looking out for yourself, of course the beers are on him.
And I want to say this is such the minority. We're talking like fractions of a percentage of the minority. So please don't get me wrong when I say this, right? The vast majority, but I don't want to use the term bad apples, but folks, people abide to temptation. They compromise their standards. They compromise their integrity. I remember years ago, a partner of mine and I, this is a teaser based off of time, and I know it's going to leave everybody on a cliffhanger here, but a partner of mine and I were going with an informant who was going to show us where there was a body dump, a dead body. And in the process of going to see this, the informant questioned me about another cop on the force that I worked with. He was surprised by my questioning. He said to me, hey, what's going on with this guy? And he referred to him by his last name. And I'm like, I don't understand what you mean. What is going on with him? He goes, Cimino, you don't know? And I'm like, no, I don't know. Like, what's going on? He goes, you really don't know? And I said, no, I don't know. And then he goes on to tell a story of this criminal behavior that this cop that I worked with for 3 years, he was such a master manipulator and liar that none of us even noticed that he was a thug criminal for 3 years. All this to say, the story is dramatic. It really is. That night we were at the sheriff's house, my partner and I, telling the sheriff specifically what was going on. The sheriff didn't know who he could trust, and he told me and my partner that we were
Sounds like a movie.
that we were to conduct an undercover investigation into this partner to see if the informant's accusations were true. We only would report to the sheriff. Oh, by the way, we had to still maintain our own jobs as drug detectives without being caught investigating this potential partner, right?
Knowing he's doing it.
Yeah,
Gracious.
innocent until proven guilty sort of thing, right? Because this informant, let's just be honest with the informant, and again, it is what it is. Sometimes informants aren't your most upstanding people, and you've got to verify a lot of what they're saying. Like it's not true or it's not credible until you can prove it, right? So all this to say is through this investigation, we end up determining that this guy is, in fact, a thug criminal. He's eventually arrested and sent to prison. But I remember vividly during this process going home and being very frightened and wondering, am I going to be guilty by association? I literally worked with this guy for 3 years.
How'd you not know?
How did I not know? I remember going to the sheriff and saying, Sheriff, like, you don't think I'm involved in this, do you? And he goes, Seth, and this is what he said, and I love it. I love it about him. And this is where Christ had gone before me in my career. Truly. The sheriff said, I remember these exact words. He goes, Seth, you're as pure as the driven snow. I would never think that about you. And never once has it crossed my mind. Absolutely not. He goes, you're the sort of guy that I need to uphold the righteousness in this and catch this guy.
I feel like you have a lot of the fear of the Lord in you. Did that help drive you to maintain a,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely, for sure.
Well, you mentioned the flesh, and we know Romans chapter 8 talks about being associated with the flesh is death. And
well, we're weak vessels. We're weak in our own understanding. The body is weak, and we're only good and strong and upheld through the grace of God. Truly, it's that imputed righteousness, right? How can I be an instrument of righteousness for Christ Jesus?
You know, and I think just because we wanted to make this episode a little bit tighter, just for the sake of time, and
bring me back. And I'll tell you the full story.
We'll bring you the whole story on that.
It'll be a cliffhanger.
I
promise you guys will be on the edge of your seat.
They might make a movie out of it.
I know. And it would be just that the looming question, I think, for a lot of us is, okay, guys like you, I mean, even you're retired, is this country needs men and women also who will serve in this way, who are upstanding Christians and citizens. And do we have that DNA? Is that enough to maintain? So my guess, maybe for you, what would any guidance on people who would potentially be in law enforcement would?
That's a good question.
That's a great question.
How should someone know if they're going to?
So yeah, let's just go back, like in the process of applying. What you see on TV isn't exactly what the job is. Let's just be very certain with that, right? Whether it's the reality shows or TV shows or the segments you see on the media with certain things that are happening. First and foremost, you really have to make sure your affairs in order. In the profession of law enforcement, they are going back into your teens to check your background and your credibility, right? Everybody has made mistakes, and they want to make sure that you admit your mistakes, that you have turned from those mistakes, and that you're honest about those mistakes. Wow. I'll be honest, when you're doing a psychological exam, 1,500 question psychological exam, getting grilled by a doctor, a polygraph examination where the polygrapher is trying to catch you in every lie that he can imagine or she can imagine. And I say that with a little drama, but it's the truth. I mean, the process, 30 to 40 page background packet that references, your credit, how you handle your home affairs, your education, your rental history, your purchasing history, all this stuff is being looked at because they want to make sure that you can control. Agencies are looking for people that can control what they can control in a setting, because how are you going to handle the uncontrollable? Because the moment you go into service at work, the uncontrollable is going to get thrust in your lap because you're going to run into somebody on the worst day of their life. Right? So they want to make sure that you can do that. So the thought is if you're interested in the profession, keep your affairs in order, be honest, live your life as a upstanding citizen, and admit you've made mistakes. Like, I'm embarrassed to this day of some of the things I had to discuss on the polygraph, because I look back at myself now. This is before I was a man of faith. I look back at myself now, I'm like, boy, that's really embarrassing, right? But I was honest with the polygrapher, and the polygrapher's like, it is what it is, right? Like, that's not going to disqualify you, and let's just move forward and everything from there. But if you lie, you die. That's the expression. If you can't be trusted in this job, there's no business for you in this job.
And that's great, because maybe that's why California's threat. Because I happen to agree. I've been around the country and I've had run-ins with police, just on the streets or just
Tell us
talking
about
to them.
that.
No, not like that.
She said.
Not run-ins. I shouldn't say run-ins. I have talked to them. I like to go up to them, and thank them and ask them for a sticker for my child. No, I'm kidding. And then also, having experience driving just through there, and yes, having gotten pulled over, especially one time we got pulled over in Nevada. And they were just like, I don't know. There's just it just switches. And happen to know a lot
Wrong
of
license plate
police officers here in California through friends and stuff. And I do notice there's some really great charactered people, very upstanding people, humble and just great. And just like, I know that I feel safe, especially here in Placer County. I feel very safe. And so what I'm hearing him say is like, I'm really grateful that California, as messy as it is, does have these. Because I didn't know that, actually. I didn't know that it was so rigorous.
Yeah, the
I would have
standards
thought the
here
standards would have been like, Californians just want to be inclusive. And so I figured it was going to be some kind of mamby-pamby
Yeah.
thing like that. But it really does. I've noticed the character of the cops out here.
And California wants to lead the way on this, right? So the keeping those standards high is incredibly important to the reputation of the law enforcement profession in the state of California. Something else that I would say is like if you have an encounter with law enforcement, you never know what call that cop just came from, right? They could have come from, heaven forbid, I hate to use the worst scenario, they may have come from like a tragic infant death or something like that, and they may be a little more curt with you than most. Be respectful, be polite. If you have questions, ask questions in a respectful manner. Find out what they want you to do, and then carry out what they've asked for you, right? Like, here's a good example. Like, if I'm going to pull you over, I would appreciate it if you would keep both hands on the wheel. That way, as I approach your car, I can see that you're not going to reach for something. And then listen to what I have to say. I will tell you, hi, my name is Sergeant Cimino. The reason I stopped you is you failed to stop the stop sign at 1st and Main. Do you have a legal justification for doing so? No, I don't. I thought I stopped. Or it could be, well, as a matter of fact, I do. My wife's in the back seat having a baby. Whoa, okay. Let's transition, right? And then ask you for certain things. So don't go rifling around and looking for things, reaching in your pocket, the center console, the glove box, without first allowing the cop to ask you for that. Do you have a driver's license? Yes. Okay, where is it? It's in my back pocket. Okay, which pocket? My right pocket. So now in my mind, your wallet's in your right rear pocket, or your ID is. If you reach anywhere other than there, I don't know what you're going to do. So I allow you to go in your pocket. Where's your insurance registration? They're in the glove box. If you reach anywhere other than the glove box, so just follow the instruction. You're welcome to ask questions, right? At a moment, let's just say it's a traffic stop. You're being detained. You don't have the freedom to leave until the officer says you can leave. It's reasonable suspicion that a crime has occurred, is occurred, or is about to occur, right? So, or the level up from reasonable suspicion would be probable cause for an arrest. Like, wait until the officer's done communicating with you and then go. I think a lot of times people, and I'm not using this term like officers look at this, but a lot of times people fail the attitude test and they'll be kind of a jerk, and they escalate the situation without ever really kind of understanding the grasp of what's going on.
That's probably more common now with the climate around everything.
Yeah.
More common, I'm guessing.
Yeah. But all this to say with the law enforcement is I would say something to you in that effect. Remember I talked about before showing dignity and respect to people. I will say that sometimes officers come off a little too brash, and it seems a little more abrupt than you would like to hear. They themselves may just, their personality may not be that sort of.
And they're not perfect either, you know? Well, Seth, thank you so much for calling. I mean, it's been just a great episode. It's a great second episode, and man, I look forward to another future episode with you. And
I'd be honored to come back, and we could talk about all kinds of things.
Well, I hope you share these. I hope you give comments. I hope you have experiences you have, and we'll be with you soon. God bless.
Thanks,
Smash
guys.
that like button.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
All right.
What an
Thank you.
honor. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.